So my name's Tracey and I am the Council's VP of Programmes. So I manage our programmes, operations, and that includes our training functions as well. In a previous life, before I joined the Council, I worked for a large acquirer where I headed up their merchant PCI DSS compliance programme. As part of that role, my team and I managed data breach scenarios. So this is a topic that is actually quite close to my heart. So data breaches, unfortunately, are a fact of everyday life in the payments ecosystem. They happen more often than any of us would like to recognise or think about. Breaches, contrary to what you may hear, are not going away. They continue to happen and are unfortunately a consequence of doing business. So to get things started, I'm going to share some of the data we have on reported breaches in 2003. This is not the whole of 2003, as I'm sure you can understand. It is a snapshot, but you'll see the dates when they come up on the screen for you. At the Council, we receive this data on our form, which is called the Appendix A, which is a template that is completed by the PFI, so the PCI Forensic Investigator, and submitted to the payment brands and then also to ourselves. This is the only documentation that the Council sees in relation to any data breach. So starting then, we're going to look at the breaches reported by region. And if you look at the screen, you'll see that this is the region here, and we have Asia Pacific that is on the increase. And as you'll see, that is accounting for almost half of breaches this year. The actual number of investigations and reported breaches are down. This is in part due to improved technologies, organisations strengthening their security postures, adopters of standards like PCI DSS, EMV, P2PE, tokenisation, and the work that you guys in the audience here are doing as well. What is a change, though, is we're not seeing many breaches reported within the large merchant environments. Now, this could be for a number of reasons. However, I'm going to say I like to think that it's attributable to the adherence of the PCI DSS standard. However, what we are seeing is an increase in small merchants and service provider breaches, particularly in some regions. So looking at the card present and versus the non-present, it's pretty clear here that I think you can see where the biggest target is, and that it isn't anything different from the previous year. So the majority of breaches are happening in the e-com, the merchant not present environment. You may also see, it's not on this slide, but you could also see, or what we see, is an option that's marked as unknown. It's better probably determined as undetermined there, so that might be a better description of that. That means that the threat got in, and it could be through either or both channels, but we've not been able to determine which channel. And as we'll see, not all PCI DSS requirements are in place at all times. Now, can you imagine that, really? So if login is insufficient, sometimes things are undetermined or unknown. So we're going to move now to look at what requirements were in place during 2023. So looking at the screen, so far this year, there have been no instances of yes in place. Now, this is obviously concerning for us, but what is slightly more encouraging is there have been some partial yeses that the requirement was in place. Worse, as you can see from this, requirement 4 in particular, but also requirements 1, 2, 3 and 7 look pretty good from a partial yes standpoint. So it seems that entities appear to be struggling, maybe sort of more than just a little bit of struggling with at least half of the requirements. Requirements 6, 10 and 11 in particular, but all of these numbers are still higher than we would like. As long as we continue to see these type of numbers and these type of requirements not being in place, there's always going to be a strong need for our PFIs. and the QSAs and our security practitioners as well. So we're going to delve in just to a little bit on the screen. You'll be able to see the comparison between 2022 versus 2023 and which requirements were in place. So organisations, it seems, are doing better this time than they were last year. However, still we are seeing too many instances of not in place, especially when you think, considering the number of reported breaches is down from this time in 2022. It's a bit of a worrying statistic, and hopefully we can see some change in the needle on that going forward. So continuing with the statistics, we're going to now look at the cause of the breach and which requirement was attributable for that breach. So you can see on the screen here, I'd like to see a widespread actually of the requirements here. It makes it easier for us to actually be able to see what is going on. So requirements 6 and 11, the vulnerability management, are the most obvious culprits here. So they seem to be the most biggest cause of the breach. So requirements 6 and 11, and they're the developing and maintaining secure systems and the systems testing. We like to say build it secure and validate it through testing. We're not there yet, but we'll keep on trying and reinforcing this message. And that's what you guys out there are doing as well for us. So thank you for that. So the next slide is contributed to breach. And I think this, if you look at those figures, you'll see there that the contributors are maybe even louder than the cause. So definite yes contributions from requirements 6 and 11 are leading the way again. And again, that's no change from sort of in previous years. Coming up behind them, as you can see, we have requirements 5 and 10. So they're quite close on their heels. If we look at requirements 1, 8 and 12, they're there, but also so are all the others. So across the board, what does that mean? It means that each and every PCI DSS requirement is not in place, and this has clearly contributed to some of the breaches that we are seeing. I think this tells quite a story, and we could probably spend a whole session on just working through the different requirements and what could or could not be a cause or contributed to breaches. But I just wanted to share this with you sort of thus far in 2023. Now, when you think about it, those requirements, there's not actually a lot that our PFI community can do about these numbers. We like to class them as the clean-up army, if you like. So they go in, their job is to clean up and then investigate and report the incident accurately. But it's really on many of the audience here today, and we are certain that you can help prevent these numbers from climbing. That's what we're all here to do. What we're going to do now is we're going to move away from statistics, and I'm going to take a deeper dive to explain to you how the process is followed by the PFI and the acquirer, and some of the challenges that are faced when you are encountered with a data breach scenario. So what is the role of the PFI and the acquirer in any breach scenario? So this is really the purpose of the presentation here, is to share this with you. It's a snapshot, it's not really an in-depth discussion, because again, I could spend a lot longer than the time that I have on discussing this with you. So as I said, data breaches are unfortunately a fact of everyday life in the payments ecosystem. There's something that happens far more frequently than any of us would like. I'm going to walk you through the process of how a breach is identified and what role the PFI and the acquirer plays in each case. Now, having worked myself on many breaches when I was an acquirer and now as the owner of the PFI programme here at the Council, I have first-hand knowledge and experience of just how devastating any breach can be for an entity. All participants in the payment system play a major role in upholding the highest information security standards and protecting cardholder data, wherever it resides. Each participant also has a role to play in a data breach event. So we're going to start with the acquirer. So the acquirer can also be known as the merchant bank, and the acquirer is the entity that has the contractual relationship with the merchant. The acquirer will usually know about the data breach before a merchant does, unless, of course, the merchant has notified the acquirer themselves that they've identified suspicious information, suspicious movement, but those type of incidents, those type of reportings are actually quite rare. So how is it then the acquirer gets to know this first? This is because behind the scenes, the payment brands monitor the payment traffic via their systems. And their systems will be able to identify when there is a suspected fraud on a merchant identification number, so the MID. Those systems that monitor the traffic flowing through a merchant ID will establish that there appears to be suspected fraud through that MID. This is called a common point of purchase, or a CPP event. The payment brand will then contact the acquirer and they'll say, "Hello, friendly acquirer, it's me, the payment brand." They don't probably say it just like that, but we can try. So they'll say, "Our systems believe that we have identified a CPP incident at this merchant MID." The payment brand would advise the acquirer if the incident requires a forensic investigation to be undertaken by a PCI qualified forensic investigator, so our PFI. Not all breaches do require a PFI. But when they do, what is it then that the acquirer has to do? So the acquirer would firstly make sure that the MID, identified as being a CPP, is their customer. Now that may sound like a foregone conclusion. However, there are many times where this may not be the case, where traffic may have been wrongly identified. So that is firstly the key thing that the acquirer does. The acquirer would then contact the merchant and explain that there has been a suspected data breach at that merchant entity. And from personal experience, I can tell you those conversations are not easy to have. They're very difficult, can be quite emotive and very upsetting for the merchant. The acquirer would then explain the process to the merchant and they'd say, "This is what you now need to do." And they would tell them how to contact a PFI. And as you guys know, we at the council maintain the list of qualified PFIs on our website. Once that merchant has engaged a PFI and made contact with them, the acquirer would then check to make sure that they have actually engaged, and they will then take part in what they call regular status calls to make sure that the merchant is making inroads into securing the environment. We're going to then move on to the role of the PCI PFI. So PFIs are required to be independent of the entity under investigation. The PFI must perform its own investigation. That part is really crucial. It has to be their own investigation and they cannot accept any influence, direction or reports from outside consultants. The PFI works for the merchant and that is at the discretion of the acquirer. And remember, the acquirer has been directed by the brand to investigate the MID. Therefore, the PFI has a responsibility to provide updates to both the payment brand and the acquirer. The PFI also needs to be independent from any qualified security assessor who may be working with you to achieve, maintain PCI DSS compliance. There has to be independence there. They have to be completely independent and have no working relationship. So they can't undertake any other services or have been undertaking any other services for that merchant entity. The PFI will enter into a contract with the merchant to investigate the suspected data breach. And once they've done that, the PFI must be able to commence the investigation within 5 business days. That's 5 business days from signing a contract with the merchant. So what the PFI will do, they'll look at your environment from a different perspective than your QSA or your internal security assessor, so your ISA, if you're making your own assessment efforts. It is a totally different investigation. So responding to a cardholder data breach, previously defined as your CDE, the scope may need to be expanded. It would need to be increased. So that's so that the PFI can find the root cause through their investigation. So they're looking for the root cause of the intrusion. The PFI will determine the scope of the investigation and the relevant sources of evidence as well. So moving on to the PFI report, after the extensive investigation, there needs to be a report that needs to be completed so that everybody involved can understand what's happened. You can expect to receive a PFI preliminary report and a PFI final report, and both of these are used on the SSC's mandatory reporting templates. These reports will also be provided to your acquirer if you have such a contract, and the affected payment brands. Now, while the PFI will not undertake and will not perform a full PCI DSS assessment, the PFI will report about whether there were any deficiencies in compliance with PCI DSS requirements, where they were and where they were observed during the investigation. This does not, I stress, does not constitute a full PCI DSS assessment, nor does a lack of findings imply that the merchant was PCI DSS compliant. So your PFI support that you get, so based on its findings, the PFI will make recommendations about how your organisation should prioritise containment and secure account data while preserving the integrity of the evidence. These recommendations are intended to complement your internal incident response plan. It's important for the recommendations to be implemented as soon as possible to help reduce the risk of further loss or further compromise. Because the PFI is required to validate containment prior to issuing their final report, they may make recommendations during the investigation process. It is very important that you begin implementing, bless you, the PFI's recommendations properly rather than waiting until the final report is issued. So working with your PFI, you need to have a very close working relationship so that they can undertake a thorough and effective investigation. The PFI will require access to data, facilities and people. It may be tempting for you to reboot devices, clear up log files, update security patches, remove suspicious software and generally try to recover as quickly as possible. However, careful presentation is both vital in isolating the root cause of the breach and also in identifying the perpetrators. Unless otherwise instructed by your PFI, do not access or alter compromised systems. That is, do not log on to the compromised systems or change passwords, do not log in as root or admin, etc. To avoid losing critical data, it is highly recommended that the compromised systems not be used. Unless otherwise instructed by the PFI, do not turn the compromised systems off. Instead, isolate the compromised systems. What I mean by that is remove them from the network. So example, unplug your network cables, revoke, disable wireless access. Preserve all evidence logs such as original evidence, security events, webs, database, firewall and so on. Make sure the integrity of the evidence is not impacted by any tools used in the collection process. Document all actions including dates, times and individuals involved. The role of the Council here is an independent organisation. As you know, we maintain responsibility for management of the payment card industry security standards and programmes, including the PFI programme. We have oversight of that PFI programme. We answer questions regarding the PFI programme guide, the PFI qualification requirements, the PFI preliminary incident response report template, the PFI PIN Security Requirements Report template, and the final PFI report template. Try saying that and with your teeth backwards. What we do not do is we do not participate on investigations, status calls, or the final forensic reports. We do not receive, review, or have access to forensic reports, and we do not manage compliance programs. And with that, thank you very much for listening. I hope that you found the information interesting. It was a whistle-stop tour of a data breach, but I hope you feel more enlightened. Thank you very much. Come and find me if you have questions. Thank you.